In the late hours of Saturday, 16 March 2024, Niger's military junta announced that it had ended an accord with the United States that allowed military personnel and civilian staff from the United States Department of Defense to operate in Niger. This announcement came days after Niger had held high-level talks with United States diplomatic and military officials.
The government of Niger, taking into account the aspirations and interests of its people, decides with full responsibility to denounce with immediate effect the agreement relating to the status of military personnel of the United States and civilian employees of the American Department of Defense in the Republic of Niger.
This decision by Niger's junta, which they say is effective immediately, comes just months after the junta took a hard line against the former colonial power France, forcing the withdrawal of French troops which had been in place in Niger for nearly a decade. In this episode of African Biographics, we look at why Niger's junta have decided to kick the United States military out of the country. The United States established diplomatic relations with Niger in 1960 following its independence from France, and these relations since Niger's independence have generally been close and friendly. United States officials considered Niger as being strategically important in its war on terror. Niger, alongside Chad and Mali, serves as a bridge between North and Sub-Saharan Africa, and all three of these countries are significant transit routes for local Al-Qaeda and ISIS affiliates who have been wreaking havoc in the Sahel. In this regard, Niger was seen as a critical actor in regional efforts to counter terrorism and promote stability. Niger was a key member of the multinational Joint Task Force as well as the G5 Sahel, and was also a peacekeeping contributor to missions in Mali and in the Central African Republic. In 2013, the United States announced that then-President Barack Obama had deployed 100 military personnel to Niger. Obama said this deployment would provide support for intelligence collection and would also facilitate intelligence sharing with French forces that were conducting operations in Mali and with other partners in the region. Since then, the number of United States troops in the nation has risen to more than 1,000. In Niger, the United States military has been operating out of two bases, including a drone base known as Airbase 201. This airbase, located near Agadez in central Niger, was built at a cost of more than $100 million.
Million square feet of asphalt runway in the middle of the Trans-Sahel region of Central Africa in the country of Niger near the city of Agadez. And it's a project, I think, that's rivaled any other construction project the Air Force has ever been involved in. In fact, it's the largest military troop labor project in Air Force history.
From 2018, at the behest of Niger's government, the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, launched its MQ-9 Reapers, which are hunter-killer drones with advanced intelligence gathering capabilities from this airbase, Airbase 201. Airbase 201 is considered as being very significant because it increased the United States' capability to surveil a larger and more significant area. In a nutshell, Airbase 201 put the United States in a more strategic location in the Sahel.
We're here, Chuck. We came to see how the U.S. military is working with the Nigerian military to fight this growing presence of terror networks, not just in Niger here, but sort of in this whole West Africa, including coastal West Africa area. And you mentioned Niger as a linchpin. The reason for that is a lot of the two main groups they really converge on this area here. It's an ISIS.
In early 2021, ruling party candidate Mohamed Bazoum won a presidential runoff, taking office in early April 2021. The transition from former President Mahamadou Issoufou to Mohamed Bazoum was Niger's first handover from one democratically elected president to the next. Up until the 2023 coup, Niger under Mohamed Bazoum was being held up by the United States as a model. At the same time, the United States was heaping money and attention and praise and encouragement and investment and assistance on Niger more so than any other country in the region. The United States Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, even paid a rare visit to Niger in hopes of shoring up President Mohamed Bazoum, who the United States considered a stalwart ally in Western security efforts against jihadists. However, on July 26, 2023, Niger's army seized power from the democratically elected president Mohamed Bazoum. 2 days later, on 20 July 2023, the head of the Presidential Guard, General Abdurrahmane Chiani, declared himself the head of the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, the military junta that had been set up after he seized power on 26 July. The military leaders assumed total government control, and President Mohamed Bazoum was placed under house arrest, awaiting trial for alleged crimes of high treason. In October 2023, the United States officially designated the military takeover as a coup, which then triggered United States laws restricting the military support and aid that it could provide to Niger. Because of the coup designation, the United States was required by law to suspend security operations in Niger, and these cannot fully resume until democracy is restored in that country. This meant that most of the drones that once monitored jihadist activities from the very expensive Airbase 201 have been grounded ever since. In December 2023, United States officials were quoted saying that they were willing to restore aid and security ties to Niger if that country met certain conditions. However, while the American officials signaled that they would like to re-establish security cooperation with Niger's government, doing so with the former Nigerian president being under house arrest would be a very complicated affair. This then brings us to the events of March 2024. During the week beginning on 10 March 2024, United States officials led by Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Molifi, and including General Michael Langley, commander of the United States Africa Command, paid a visit to the Nigerian junta. Colonel Amadou Abdarrahmane, the spokesperson of the Nigerian junta, would later review that the United States delegation did not follow diplomatic protocol and that Niger was not informed about the composition of this delegation, the date of its arrival, or the agenda. It then turned out that the agenda of this visit was around the current military transition in Niger, military cooperation between the two countries, as well as Niger's choice of partners in the fight against militants linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. In response, Niger's junta said that they found this visit and the approach from the United States in general to be highly condescending. It is even alleged that Niger's leader, Abdurrahmane Chiani himself, refused to meet with this United States delegation that was in Niger for 3 days.
The Niger military junta, especially condemning what they call the U.S., there's this word they're using which is really interesting, that the U.S. has been condescending in their dealings with Niger, and the threat of consequences from the U.S. delegation, they didn't appreciate that. So they're saying they have to leave immediately, both the U.S. troops there and also civilian personnel that are in the country. Where we've reached out to the Department of Defense for reaction. We're still waiting to hear what the U.S. will say about that, but it's really important here.
In his address, Colonel Abdarrahmane alleged that the status of United States forces and their presence in Niger was illegal and violated constitutional and democratic rules because he claimed that this presence was unilaterally imposed back in 2012. The colonel even stated that Niger was not aware of the number of United States civilian and military personnel on its soil or the amount of equipment deployed, and according to the agreement, the United States military had no obligation to respond to any request for help against militants. But it will be interesting to see if the United States military complies with this order from the Nigerian military junta. As I mentioned earlier, the United States has already invested a lot of money in Niger, and so it will be interesting to see what action it takes after this. Keep in mind that there's also the looming threat of Russia that has been eager to exploit any breaches in relations between Niger and the Western nations to further expand its regional influence. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.